Welcome, everyone, to our fourth episode of Midwest Multifamily, where we talk about the development side of multifamily and construction, building, and management. I'm here again on our fourth episode with one of the founders of P&R Companies, Ryan Nelson. And we have, if you haven't heard our first three episodes, you're joining us shortly after Ryan has told a story about where he started his company himself as a young plumber, meeting the P in P&R, his partner, and how the two of them got together to form this business that became one of the most elite plumbing and HVAC companies in our area, which is the Twin Ports of Minnesota and Superior, Wisconsin. And so as they grew their business in this area, they eventually came to realize that as this plumbing and HVAC company, they were comfortable building their own multifamily. And in the last 7 years, they've managed to build 7 to 8 years, they've managed to build 700 units in this Twin Ports while also doing some steel plumbing and heating. They've managed to vertically integrate. They're looking at potentially 500 units over the next 3 to 4 years in their future, and it's just a true success story. And so Ryan decided, as part of P&R Companies, he wanted to start this podcast to kind of deliver that education out there into the public, to be a part of everybody's got a podcast, but it was really important to him to deliver those lessons and values that he's learned from his research and podcast. And so this episode, we want to talk financials. We want to talk state of the market. We've done the history of the company, and it's important that we get out there. And one of the most important things in developing and even in buying is the financials. If you don't get your financials right, you're going to have issues and you're going to have problems. And now, as Ryan told us in one of the greatest lines I've ever heard, the devil is in the details. If you don't find him, he's going to get you. And where that really comes into play in multifamily and development, in building, or even if you're buying and acquiring, is the financials. And so we first want to talk about how did you get to that financial examination? Again, we did a little bit of review as in our last couple episodes, but kind of talk again how you learned how important those financials are. You can't just build everything. You can't just go out there and construct. You got to know how your building's going to operate.
Yeah, so we never really put a lot of focus on our financials until post the first 24 unit, the Village Apartments. The smaller properties, we just hadn't had anybody that was really giving us the education or pushing us to a point where we had to realize that them were important, and probably one of the most important things, because if they're not if your financials aren't successful, nothing is. So we had been working with a small accounting firm at that time that was just doing the job. We were closing the books at the end every year. We were doing our tax returns. We were feeling like we were doing everything we needed to. But we weren't watching things the way we should have and the way we needed to, as in the market rent increases when they need to happen, utility costs, management costs, just all of them things just are so important to, the performa of the building and making sure that you're successful, because the bank's looking for that information on a monthly basis, and some that don't, and look at it on an annual basis, you're in even more trouble at that point, because now you've went 12 months not knowing if you were doing a good job or not. So
that's a year. It's a year of potential. That's lost revenue if you're not doing a good job. So I mean, that demonstrates how important this is.
So we, initially it was like, we had looked around and seen what other people were doing, and we've worked with a lot of developers, and we wanted to just build. We wanted to prove that we could build the product. Well, we proved it. We built it. Now we start learning a lot about financials and what it takes to be successful with making sure that your management is done correctly, your efficiencies are done the best to your ability, and making sure that the rents aren't delinquent, making sure that your vacancies aren't low, getting new tenants in when other tenants are given notice, and some have reasons to get out, within their lease, within a year. So just making sure that you stay up on top of all of that stuff. But then the biggest thing is the financing part of it. When, you do a project and you start a project, you get an interest rate that is defined of what today's market is. And today's market, as in today in 2023, is pretty variable.
So what you're talking about, I think, is the construction loan, right? Is that what you're talking about when you
Yes.
start a project? Yep. And so for those out there that aren't familiar with this, you start a project with a construction loan, right? I mean, there's kind of four legs. It sounds like when we build. There's when it comes to finance management, I should say financial. You have your cost to build, you have your cost to manage, you have you have your rents that bring in your revenue, but almost one of the biggest pieces, like you're saying, is the cost to finance the building, right?
Yes.
Yep. And so now the construction loan is a variable interest rate loan, and a lot of people don't know that. So talk a little bit about that and how it impacts your business.
So it's very important today because it changes so much.
Mm-hmm.
The environment we're in today is a lot different than it was in 2017 when we were going from, call it, construction debt into permanent debt. We had call it a 5% interest rate throughout construction, and it stayed there the whole time. It was flat. But when we went into permanent financing, it actually got better. So we picked up some cash flow because the interest rate had actually went down from our construction debt because the risk was gone from not having a stabilized property and just having a property that's there getting built, not providing any income.
So you're talking about that, the first part is that construction loan, and what's a term on a construction loan usually look like?
Typically, most construction loans are about 24 months.
So they give you 2 years to build it. It's a variable interest rate, so it can pop with the market. Like you said, back in 2017, it was pretty stable. I mean, we didn't have the inflation we're experiencing today. We didn't have the Fed ratcheting up rates every other day, people betting on the T-bill and what's going on. And then so after that, you need to refinance that construction loan, right? So you need to go, is it off in the same bank or is it a different bank? When you refinance that with permanent financing, and what's that term look like?
So at that point, on our first project, we didn't really know much about debt. It was kind of like the credit union gave us opportunity to be able to build this building because they bought into our performa, bought into, our company as something they felt we could deliver. So at that point, we underwrote the debt that they provided for us. And the construction debt was defined on a variable rate. For 12 months, I think we took that one on for because it was a smaller project. And then once it's fully stabilized, which means rented to, occupancy of 95% or better.
It's a high occupancy for your first building.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, 95% or better. So that's when you can go into permanent debt. And then you go from an interest only construction debt, which would means that you're only paying interest on what you've borrowed. So the principal never goes down. It's always the same. Then you go into an amortized loan, which at that point,
That's the permanent financing is the average.
That's the permanent financing within the local banking industry here that we had at the time. And it was a 5-year term. So that means in 5 years, you have the opportunity or you need to redo the loan. They set your term, your amortization, which means the period of time that you divide out, call it the cost of your build. Say it's $2 million. It's a 20-year period. You divide that over 240 months.
Factoring in the interest, right? Yeah.
So that's how you pay it down,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
So you're paying on your interest and you're paying on your principal.
Your monthly payment is based on 20 years, but in 5 years, you need the balloon, right? You need to pay it off or refinance it, right?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how most local banks work is not many of them will get you past the 5-year mark because they just don't know what the market's going to be like. And they're not willing to take that risk of buying money for a longer period of time than that.
It's a brilliant move by the bank, right? They get you in on a 20-year, but in 5 years, if we don't like the interest rate, we got to change it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
but it
you
works. It's a double-edged sword. If interest rates go down, you get a good benefit from it
Yep.
as well. Yep. Okay. So, tell me about how you kind of started to learn this. Did you just learn this all through the village? Was it, this was kind of a crash course for you guys?
So at that point, we hadn't done much educating on call it podcasts and reading and ebooks and things like that. So we didn't know a lot about it, but started getting some education at that point because we got this big building we just built. There's a lot we need to learn still about the operational aspect of it with the financials, and it's a lot of time of just listening and reading and trying to figure out what's best going to lay out the road ahead of us.
So one of the beauties of multifamily is that you even if you develop it or even if you buy it, those that are in the market don't look at the lending as we pay the bank back. They look at it as essentially our tenants pay the bank back because that financing and operating cost is built in. Was that the mentality you guys had, or is it more so we're going to build this building, it's going to be part of our portfolio? Was that mentality, did that come later? Or did you already have it when you got there?
No, I wouldn't say that we actually had that mentality at that point. It was more so really at that point we were happy to build a building that size and put it into operations and then try to figure out what it took to operate it. And I'm still learning today and what it takes to do that. So it's been a long road, just being able to figure out all of the different things that make up this one number that you're looking for and how you can actually provide a lot of value throughout the year to make that look better every year.
So when did you learn, the famous DSCR, debt service coverage ratio? When did you learn that word? That's a very important one. It's something to teach those that don't know about it.
Well, we had to provide information to the bank that showed that we were going to create more income than we needed to pay on our debt. So what you do is you take your revenue from your rent, you subtract all of your expenses. That gives you the availability to pay on your debt. That's your debt service coverage. So then you divide them two numbers, and they want to make sure that you're covered by 20%. They want to make sure that minimum you're making 20% more than what your debt is for coverage every month.
And that's pretty common, but that's changing nowadays a little bit. You don't see that 80% debt service coverage ratio anymore, do you?
No, I mean, so what's happening now is a lot of times when we're borrowing money from the bank, we're looking for these appraisals that we're going to support the loan size. And now what's happening is the appraisals aren't really as important anymore because the interest rate on the loans now are so much more that it drives the ability of what you borrow against that property. And most times before we were at about 75 to 80% loan to value. And now we're down into like the 55 to 60% loan to value because that is what interest rates have done is to the debt service coverage. That's what everything is about now is debt service coverage, and it's not about loan to value anymore.
And that is essentially the banks mitigating their risk in this high interest rate environment, isn't it?
It is in a way, but they're just asking for the same thing they asked for before. But you can't cover the debt if you got a higher interest rate. So the higher your interest rate, the more money that you have to come in with at the beginning.
So so we're talking a little bit about how important the financials are and then also the state of the market today. So that's slowing growth essentially because now people are having to find more money to build the same product than we did 5 or 6 years ago, right?
People are definitely looking for a lot of things. They're turning a lot more rocks than they were before to get a deal to go. And
Picking up the coffee cans in the
Yeah.
backyard.
I mean, a lot of deals are penciled down, but you know, if you can be creative and you can find communities that need development and want development, then there's opportunity out there still. But you know, it definitely is a lot harder than it was before. Before, you know, when we started developing in 2016, I felt like everything was in our favor when we finished. Like we picked up equity in the deal. We're able to do, you know, some cash out refinances.
So explain cash out refinance for people who don't know what that is now. You get done with it. You got the construction loan, right? You take it out with a permanent. Go ahead, explain that for.
So cash out refinances is the only way it happens is if the story's told better when you're done than when you started. That was easier to do before than it is today. Everybody's fighting higher costs. Everybody's fighting tighter timelines on getting equipment and materials. So that it's just it's a tougher situation today to say that you're going to come out better at the end of a job than you were when you started. Like they're trying to say that it's impossible today to do that.
So essentially pre-pandemic, right? Pre-supply chain, pre-interest rate hikes, you could add significant value to your portfolio essentially by building it yourself. And then when you go into permanent financing, you're able to take out a loan that justifies significantly more. That allows you to take some cash off the top, maybe put it into your next building, right? So it allowed you to have this business model. Well, now post-pandemic, we have, a lot of maybe wood's come back down, but you still have supply chain issues that are affecting building. These high interest rates are really what's killing a lot of deals and making that difficult to do. And so, the housing industry, the state of the housing industry is in a pretty tough spot economically just because of those things. Because now builders like you who could use that as part of a business model and keep stacking those refis, they're running out of gas because they can't necessarily do that. And at the same time, we don't have enough housing in this country. I mean, in almost every part of this country. And so, and we just heard Powell yesterday say that he's going to have more rate hikes coming up because he's got to cool inflation. And so as a developer that wants to keep going, that's finding, the world has this strong need for our product, but yet the financials are being hurt by macroeconomics. I mean, what do you see the market doing, whether it's nationally, whether it's locally, whether it's within your own business? What do you think developers should be thinking about as they try to approach this? Because I got to imagine anybody that's listening to this probably thought, oh yeah, developers, how do they do this? And it's that original model. Like it's like building your own house, right? Like doing the own labor on your own house. You can save a lot by doing it yourself. Now we're having that problem that maybe you can't do that. So kind of what do you see as might be the state of the market? Is it a hold and wait? Is it, how do you feel about it?
I feel like I'm getting into this business right now as a new investor or a new developer is going to be really tough. Like, I think it's good, but it's bad. It's good because I feel like we're almost at the top and it's going to get better.
But you see us coming over that hill a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like you're going to get discouraged if you go out and try to talk to the bank and try to make numbers work right now, just because their appetite's a lot less, their risk is a lot higher. There might be just, a couple of year period here where people are going to have to maybe just depend on the people that are successful right now and have the tools in their toolbox to make the deals work today. But them are the people that have the experience and the ability to go out and talk to, people that they've had relationships with for the last 5 to 10, 20 years. And relationships are probably what's going to get you through the next couple of years.
Speaking of going back in time, I feel like this is the cheesy part in the 90s where they'd like flash, like, call us at, this is our number.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's true though. I mean, the developers that have the experience, we have the banking relationships, and with banks being hesitant to lend because they just don't have the appetite at these interest rates because it's, interest rates are pushing up the cost of the building, but you can only push up rents so far.
Yeah.
And, you can't break a market with your rents. And what I always tell people, and especially communities, we talk to a lot of small communities, and I do a lot of our outreach, and there's, especially with smaller communities, they look at developers as like this massive pile of cash that can just come into town and, drop a dump truck full. And the truth is, we borrow money just like anyone else. And to do this, we have to run the numbers just like you're saying. And so now you have other communities that have low rents, but we still have the same macro challenges in those areas. And so, everybody's feeling this pain. And so it's going to be harder. Like, there's going to have to find money somewhere to get these things going, because we do have a housing issue, and the housing issue is constraining growth, especially in smaller communities. And so, we've thought about this, and you could talk a little bit about this, is potentially you can fill that need, because you've always had that passion to fill the need for housing and communities. And have you seen tools out there that help people develop on that?
I think there's some tools out there, call it the incentives from, different municipalities. And I think every municipality is different because everyone's in a different situation.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are feeling like they're pretty okay with the way housing is right now, and they're just going to wait until they see things get better. And others are like very, in a bad need for housing, and they don't feel like they can wait until they find out what's going to happen with the market. So they're feeling like, let's find some ways to be able to make a project work, and let's, get the trust in a trusted developer and partner up with them and make a project work still.
And we're going through that personally. We have a project at PNR right now where, we ran into some wetlands on a hill, right? And one of the messages we said is, we need help from the municipality, not necessarily the money wise, but because we've gotten all that negotiated already. But our first response was, hey, if you're not ready to act now, community, and to help with this, you're not going to see housing for another year, because we have winters we have to worry about. We have, building schedules that we have to worry about. And so you're right. I mean, if there's a message to any communities, it's be prepared to act as soon as you can. If you have that you have that developer and that trusted person or part of town. So PNR, I mean, let's talk about it. Are we putting down pencils here, or what's our plan going forward?
I don't think we're putting down pencils necessarily, but we're looking for creative solutions to keep the pencils working at a slower pace. We are concentrated on our operations. We're making sure that we're going through everything and trying to tidy everything up that we can to get ready for, call it, the better times ahead. And at them times, you don't really look as closely at your operations because you don't have the time that you do today. So we're doing two things. We're watching kind of everything that we have out there that's performing today, and we're looking for creative solutions on how to make things go forward with development also, but it probably at a slower pace than we have.
I mean, so what all storytellers, and I've noticed that comedians do this really well, but this isn't a funny thing, so maybe that's the wrong analogy. But all storytellers find a way to bring something back around, right? There's a theme where things start, and sometimes it comes where the ending meets the beginning. What I think is so interesting about what we've talked about today, which people are going to notice by my outfit, that all these 4 episodes were filmed in one day, is that you started your business in one of the worst economic times we had seen in a long time. I mean, you were coming off that crash of 2008, and you guys survived. And here you are staring one of the worst building times in a long time. I mean, significantly. I mean, maybe since the 80s. I mean, we haven't seen interest rate spikes. I might even be faster than the 80s that we're seeing them now. And your plan is to find a way through it.
Yeah.
And I mean, what a cool message is, like, if you're doing it, find a way through it. Get creative, get innovative, find different ways to do it instead of just putting a pencil down. Break it in half and sharpen it twice. I don't know. And so that's a cool thing to do. And so, given that P&R is still moving forward, I mean, a really cool thing. Is there, something on the construction wise with your expertise? Is there savings that you're finding out there, or is that still pretty tough with the supply chains?
I think it's pretty tough. I mean, commodities are something that, we're seeing to be less, but when you put the manufacturing on top of the commodities, I think that's where we lose all the value. I think if you looked on the stock market today and seen where lumber's sitting today, it's probably where it was in 2018. You look at the manufactured materials that goes with that commodity, you're not seeing them savings.
Yeah.
So we're finding some things, but I think going forward through these unforeseen times, the most important thing you can do is just fall back and trust the people that you've been working with for the last 10 years. Put your trust in your relationships and use your relationships to help you get through tougher times, and the strong will survive.
That's great advice. I mean, batten down the hatches and trust your early soldiers around you, right? All right. So I'm a young developer. I got 50 units in the hopper or something. I want to try and build another one. And I come to you and I go, Ryan, you got some cool experience. What would you advise me now to do? How do you think I should kind of manage my company going forward?
I would say that you should probably bring in some people that'll help you with the project. Maybe explore some ideas outside of what you normally would have to get the project done, and also analyze it, twice as much as you would have before, just to make sure that you don't want to do a bad deal. Like, the bad deals could hurt you for a long time. Just try to find a way to not get hurt through the deal. Don't do the deal because you feel like you have to. Make sure you're doing the deal for all the right reasons.
That's great advice. What we hear one time, it's the best deal you ever do is the worst deal you don't do, right?
Yeah.
And so that's good. And lean on your relationships. And if you don't have enough, find some more. That's what I think you're saying is, reach out to people that can really help your business and help, sharpen the pencil, I guess is the best way to say it. So, well, that's great. I think that's a good spot for our fourth episode. This has been fun. One full day of shooting. I mean, this is our first crack at it. So critics, please be kind of nice to us. I promise we'll get better as this goes. And, I know my hand gestures. Actually, here's a joke my dad taught me. He said, an Italian was walking down Main Street with 2 watermelons in his hand. And somebody asked him where City Hall was, and he had to stop to put down one watermelon, put down the other one, and say, "I don't know." And so that's an Italian talking with his hands, I guess. It's all I can do. So thank you to the audience. Thank you to Ryan for setting this up and being the guy that says, you know what, we're just going to do it. And we're doing it. And we're going to keep coming back with some more advice. We're going to teach all sorts of things about multifamily development. We're going to get some good guests. And we're gonna hopefully run this thing pretty good. So thank you, everyone. That is the end of episode 4 on Midwest Multifamily. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you again.